Everyone in New York knows the name Stefano Moretti. He's the ghost in the machine, the man who runs the city from the shadows. You don't look him in the eye, and you certainly don't try to save him. But on a rainy Tuesday in November, Coraline Jones, a 24-year-old waitress drowning in debt, did the unthinkable. When a silenced pistol cleared leather in a crowded restaurant, she didn't run, she didn't hide. She screamed, "Get down!" and threw her body in front of a bullet meant for the Mafia king. Why save a monster? The answer isn't bravery. It's a secret that would cost them both everything. This isn't a fairy tale. This is how the waitress became the queen. The rain on 54th Street wasn't washing the city clean. It was just making the grime slicker. Inside the Gilded Olive, the air smelled of garlic, expensive cologne, and damp wool. It was an old-school joint, the kind with red velvet booths that had absorbed secrets since the 1970s, and waiters who knew when to pour wine and when to disappear into the kitchen. Coraline Jones adjusted her apron, wincing as the knot dug into her lower back. She was 6 hours into a double shift, and her feet felt like they were encased in cement. "Table 4 needs more bread, Coraline. Stop daydreaming," snapped Marco, the floor manager. He was a small man with a Napoleonic complex and a hairline that was retreating faster than his patience. "On it, Marco," Coraline said, her voice flat. She grabbed a basket of focaccia, her mind drifting to the eviction notice sitting on her kitchen counter in Queens. 3 months behind on rent. Her brother, Danny, had promised to help, but Danny had disappeared 2 weeks ago, leaving only a cryptic text message. "I'm going to fix everything, sis. Just wait." She moved through the dining room, navigating the labyrinth of tables. It was a Tuesday, usually a slow night, but the energy in the room shifted abruptly at 8:15 p.m. The chatter died down, replaced by the clinking of silverware and hushed whispers. The heavy oak doors at the front swung open. Stefano Moretti walked in. You didn't need to know who he was to know he was important. He wore a charcoal suit that cost more than Coraline made in a year. He was tall, with dark hair swept back and eyes the color of a stormy sea, cold, calculating, and utterly indifferent to the stares he attracted. He was flanked by 2 men who looked like they chewed gravel for breakfast. One was Luca, his longtime enforcer, a man whose neck was wider than his head. The restaurant fell into a terrified reverence. This was Stefano's territory. "Table 8 is reserved for Mr. Moretti," Marco hissed, shoving Coraline toward the back. "Take the wine list over. Don't make eye contact. Don't speak unless spoken to. And for God's sake, don't spill anything." "Son." Coraline swallowed hard. She grabbed the leather-bound wine list and approached the corner booth. Stefano sat with his back to the wall. Standard procedure for men with enemies. He was already scanning the room, his gaze dissecting every patron, every waiter, every shadow. When Coraline reached the table, the air felt colder. "Good evening," she said, her voice trembling slightly. She placed the menus down. "Can I start you gentlemen off with—" "San Pellegrino," Stefano said, not looking at her. His voice was a low baritone, smooth but edged with steel, and a bottle of the 98 Barolo. "Open it at the table." "Yes, sir." Coraline retreated to the bar, her heart hammering. She retrieved the wine, her hands shaking as she pulled the cork. When she returned to the table, Stefano was in deep conversation with Luca. The shipment from Jersey was light, Luca was murmuring. "Someone is skimming, boss. We'll handle it tonight," Stefano replied, his tone devoid of emotion. "If Ricci is skimming, Ricci disappears." Coraline poured a splash of wine into Stefano's glass for him to taste. He paused, finally looking up at her. For a second, their eyes met. Coraline felt a jolt, like touching a live wire. He didn't look like a monster. He looked exhausted. There were lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and heavy burdens. "It's good," he said, dismissing her with a nod. Coraline stepped back, intending to fade into the woodwork. She moved towards the kitchen, scanning the room out of habit, a habit she'd picked up growing up in a house where you had to watch the door to know what kind of mood your father was in. That's when she saw him. A man in a hooded grey sweatshirt was sitting at a small table near the entrance. He had been nursing a coffee for an hour. He hadn't ordered food. He kept his head down. But as Coraline walked past, he looked up. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The eyes under the hood were bloodshot and desperate, but she knew them. She knew the scar above the left eyebrow from a bicycle accident when they were 12. Danny. Her brother wasn't supposed to be here. He was supposed to be in rehab, or working the construction job he lied about having. Danny's hand moved inside his sweatshirt. He stood up. His gaze wasn't on Coraline, it was locked on the corner booth, on Stefano Moretti. Time dilated. Coraline saw the metallic glint of the pistol as Danny drew it from his waistband. She saw Luca, Stefano's bodyguard, distracted by his phone. She saw Stefano raising the glass of wine to his lips, completely unaware that death was standing 20 feet away. If she screamed, "Danny, no!" the bodyguards would kill her brother before he pulled the trigger. If she did nothing, her brother would become a murderer, and the most powerful man in New York would die. She didn't think. Instinct, primal and electric, took over. "Get down!" Coraline screamed the words, her voice tearing through the hushed restaurant. She didn't run toward her brother. She ran toward the target. Danny fired. Pop, pop. The sound was deceptively small, like firecrackers, but the impact was catastrophic. Coraline threw herself across the booth, shoving Stefano hard against the red velvet upholstery. She felt a sledgehammer slam into her right shoulder, spinning her around. The force knocked the wind out of her. Glass shattered. Screams erupted. She collapsed onto the cold tile floor, the smell of expensive wine mixing with the coppery tang of blood. Above her, chaos broke loose. She heard Luca roaring orders. She heard more shots. Louder, distinct cracks of return fire. "Secure the exit. Get the car." Then, there were hands on her. Strong, calloused hands. "Look at me." She blinked, her vision blurring at the edges. Stefano Moretti was hovering over her. His impeccable suit was stained with crimson. Her crimson. His face, previously a mask of indifference, was contorted with shock and something else. Rage? Confusion? "You hit!" he barked. "My brother!" she wheezed, the pain radiating down her arm like liquid fire. Don't kill him." "Stay with me," Stefano commanded, ignoring her plea. He pressed a cloth napkin hard against her shoulder. The pain was blinding. "Why did you do that? Who are you?" "Coraline," she whispered. The lights of the chandelier above began to spin. "I'm just the waitress." Blackness swallowed her whole. The first thing Coraline noticed was the silence. Hospitals were usually noisy. Beeping monitors, squeaking shoes, the PA system. But this room was quiet, save for the rhythmic whoosh click of a high-end ventilation system. She opened her eyes. This wasn't a hospital room, or at least not a normal one. The walls were painted a soothing cream color. There was artwork on the walls, real oil paintings, not generic prints. A large window looked out over the Manhattan skyline, the city twinkling in the twilight. She tried to sit up, but a sharp tug in her shoulder made her gasp. "Easy," a voice said from the corner. Coraline froze. Stefano Moretti was sitting in a leather armchair near the window. He wasn't wearing the suit jacket anymore. His white dress shirt was rolled up at the sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle and ink. He was reading a file, a thick manila folder. "Where am I?" Coraline croaked. Her throat felt like sandpaper. "Mount Sinai, private wing," Stefano said, closing the folder. He stood up and walked towards the bed. He moved with a predator's grace, silent and deliberate. "You've been unconscious for 2 days. The bullet passed through your deltoid, shattered the clavicle, missed the subclavian artery by 2 millimeters. You're lucky." "Lucky," she repeated, the irony bitter on her tongue. Did you catch the shooter?" Stefano's expression hardened. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He got away. My men were too busy trying to keep me alive and figure out why a waitress decided to play Secret Service. Relief washed over Coraline, followed instantly by guilt. Danny was alive, but he was on the run from the Moretti family. That was a fate worse than prison. Stefano pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his eyes bored into hers. Now let's talk about the truth, Coraline Jones. He tapped the folder on his lap. I have your whole life in here. Born in Queens. Father was a drunk, died in 05. Mother passed 2 years ago. You work double shifts at the Gilded Olive and a diner in Brooklyn. You're $60,000 in debt, mostly medical bills from your mother's cancer treatments. Coraline felt naked, exposed. Is it a crime to be poor, Mr. Moretti? No, he said softly. But it is suspicious. A woman with nothing to lose saves a man she doesn't know. Why, I told you I reacted. Bullshit, Stefano said. He didn't raise his voice, which made it scarier. You shouted, "Get down," before the gun was even fully raised. You saw him. You knew he was going to shoot. He paused, his eyes narrowing. Or maybe you were part of it. A setup? You take a graze, become the hero, and infiltrate my life. A graze, Coraline snapped, gesturing to a bandaged shoulder with her good arm. He nearly blew my arm off. You think I planned that? People have done crazier things to get to me. I saw his face, Coraline lied, her heart pounding. He looked nervous. I knew. Stefano studied her for a long, agonizing minute. He was a human lie detector, a man who built an empire on reading weakness. Coraline held his gaze, terrified that he would see Danny's face in her own features. They had the same chin, the same nose. Finally, Stefano leaned back. My doctors tell me you need extensive physical therapy. You can't work. You can't pay your rent. I'll figure it out, she said defiantly. You won't, Stefano countered, because as of this morning, you are a target. Coraline went cold. What? The press got hold of it. The Angel of the Olive, they're calling you. If my enemies think you matter to me, they will come for you to get to me. If they think you saw the shooter's face, they will come to silence you. He stood up, buttoning his cuffs. You can't go back to your apartment, Coraline. It's not safe. So what do I do? Tears pricked her eyes. She was trapped. I owe you a life debt, Stefano said formally. In his world, that meant everything. Until the shooter is caught and the threat is neutralized, you are under my protection. You're coming to my estate. I don't want your protection, Coraline argued, though she knew she had no leverage. I just want to go home. Stefano walked to the door. He paused, his hand on the handle. He looked back at her, and for a brief moment, the hardness in his eyes softened. You saved the devil, Coraline, he said quietly. Now you have to live in hell with him. 2 days later, the estate. The drive to Long Island was silent. Coraline sat in the back of an armored SUV, her arm in a sling. Stefano sat next to her, typing on a BlackBerry, ignoring her presence. The Moretti estate was a fortress disguised as a mansion. High stone walls, iron gates, and men with earpieces patrolling the perimeter. As the car pulled up the long gravel driveway, Coraline felt a sense of dread. She was walking into the lion's den, and she was hiding the fact that the lion's prey was her own brother. The car stopped. Luca opened the door. "Welcome home, Miss Jones," Luca grunted. He didn't look happy about having a civilian in the house. Stefano stepped out and offered Coraline his hand to help her down. She hesitated, then took it. His grip was warm, firm. "My house rules are simple," Stefano said as they walked up the grand staircase. "You don't go into the West Wing. That's business. You don't leave the grounds without Luca. And you don't lie to me." He stopped at the top of the stairs and looked down at her. "If I find out you're hiding something, Coraline, not even the fact that you saved my life will help you." Coraline nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. Understood. He led her to a guest room that was bigger than her entire apartment. It had a 4-poster bed, a fireplace, and a balcony overlooking the gardens. Rest, he said. Dinner is at 8. Dress formally. I don't have any clothes, she pointed out. Check the closet. Stefano turned and left, closing the door with a solid click. Coraline walked to the closet and pulled it open. It was filled. Rows of silk dresses, cashmere sweaters, tailored trousers, everything in her size. She pulled out a black silk dress, her fingers trembling. He had done this in 2 days. The power he wielded was terrifying. She walked to the window and looked out at the sprawling grounds. Somewhere out there, Danny was running, and she was trapped in a golden cage with the man who wanted to kill him. She pulled her cell phone from her pocket, the one thing she had refused to give up. She checked her messages. Nothing. She typed a quick text to the number she hoped Danny was still using. I'm safe, but he's hunting you. Get out of the city. Do not contact me. She hit send, then immediately deleted the message. A knock at the door made her jump. Miss Jones? It was a maid. Mr. Moretti sent this up for you. The maid entered and placed a small velvet box on the bedside table. Coraline approached it slowly. She opened the lid. Inside was a necklace, a delicate silver chain with a pendant shaped like a guardian angel. There was a note. For the Angel of the Olive. Thank you. S. Coraline stared at the jewelry. He was charming her, or perhaps he was genuinely grateful. It made everything worse. If he was a monster, she could hate him. But if he was a man capable of gratitude, how was she going to betray him to save her brother? Downstairs in his study, Stefano Moretti poured himself a scotch. He watched the security feed on his monitor. He watched Coraline standing in her room, holding the necklace. Boss, Luca said, stepping out of the shadows. We ran facial rec on the blurry CCTV footage from the restaurant. Stefano took a sip of the amber liquid. And? No matches in the police database for a shooter profile. But, Luca hesitated. We ran a familial match against the staff, just in case. Stefano turned his chair around. Tell me. The shooter, Luca said, placing a photo on the desk. He shares 40% of his facial markers with Coraline Jones. Stefano looked at the photo of the shooter, then at the live feed of the woman upstairs holding his gift. The glass in his hand cracked. Her brother, Stefano whispered, his voice turning into a growl. She didn't save me. She saved him. He stood up, buttoning his jacket. The gratitude was gone. The coldness returned, darker than before. Keep her comfortable, Luca, Stefano said, walking towards the door. Let her think she's safe. Let her think she's fooling me. And when her brother reaches out, we'll be listening. For 2 weeks, the Moretti estate became Coraline's entire world. It was a gilded cage, beautiful and suffocating. Her shoulder was healing. The physical therapy sessions were grueling, overseen by a silent doctor on Stefano's payroll. But the real torture wasn't the physical pain. It was the man who owned the house. Stefano was playing a game, though Coraline didn't know the rules. He didn't lock her in her room. He didn't interrogate her under a swinging light bulb. Instead, he did something far more dangerous. He charmed her. Every evening, he insisted she join him for dinner. They sat at a long mahogany table, candles flickering between them, while silent staff served food that cost more than Coraline's rent. Tell me about your childhood, Coraline, Stefano asked one Tuesday night, swirling a glass of Pinot Noir. He watched her over the rim of the glass. Did you always have that protective instinct, the one that made you jump in front of a gun? Coraline's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Every question felt like a landmine. I raised my brother, she said, sticking to the sliver of truth. Our dad was difficult. I learned to step in between them. Your brother, Stefano repeated. He set the glass down. Danny, right? You haven't mentioned him much. Does he know you're here? No, Coraline lied, her heart thumping against her ribs. We aren't close anymore. He's traveling. Stefano nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. A shame. Family is everything. A man who abandons his sister doesn't deserve protection. He stood up and walked around the table. Coraline stiffened. He stopped behind her chair, his hand resting lightly on her uninjured shoulder. The heat of his palm seeped through the silk of her blouse. "I have a surprise for you," he murmured near her ear. He led her to the library, a massive room filled with leather-bound books and the scent of old paper. In the center of the room sat a grand piano. "My mother taught me to play," Stefano said, sitting on the bench. "It's the only time the noise in my head stops." He began to play. It was Debussy, Clair de Lune. The melody was haunting, melancholic, and tender. Coraline watched his hands. They were large, scarred hands, hands that she knew had ended lives, moving with impossible grace over the ivory keys. She found herself drawn to him. It was a terrifying realization. He was a criminal, a monster who ran the city's underworld. But in this light, with the music filling the room, he looked like a lonely king on a throne of knives. When the song ended, he looked up at her. The harshness in his eyes was gone, replaced by an intensity that made her knees weak. "Coraline," he said softly, "you saved my life. I haven't forgotten that. Whatever debt you are in, whatever troubles you have outside these walls, let me fix them. Tell me what you need." "I need you to let my brother go. When you find him," she wanted to scream. "I need you to not kill me when you find out I'm a liar." Instead, she stepped closer. "Why are you being so kind to me, Stefano? I'm just a waitress." He stood up, towering over her. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her jawline. "Because in a world of wolves, you're the first innocent thing I've seen in a long time," he lied smoothly. "And I find that I want to keep you." Coraline's breath hitched. For a moment, the lie felt real. She leaned into his touch, starving for comfort, starving for safety. Buzz. The moment shattered. Stefano's phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out, his face instantly hardening into the mask of the Don. "Go to bed, Coraline," he said, his voice cold again. "I have work to do." Coraline fled the room, her heart conflicted. She was falling for him, and she didn't know that as soon as the door clicked shut, Stefano answered the phone. "Talk to me, Luca. We found a trace on the brother," Luca's voice crackled. "He's in the Bronx, hiding out in a squat on 148th Street. We can grab him tonight." Stefano looked at the piano keys, remembering the way Coraline had looked at him. With hope. "No," Stefano said. "Not yet. If we grab him now, she'll hate me. I need her to choose me first. I need her to give him up voluntarily." "Boss, that's risky. The kid tried to kill you." "The kid is an amateur. He's a pawn," Stefano growled. "I want to know who put the pawn on the board. Someone hired him, and I'm going to use Coraline to find out who." "How?" "Tomorrow is the Red Cross Gala," Stefano said, a cruel smile touching his lips. "I'm taking her with me. We're going to flush the rats out into the open." The dress arrived in a box the size of a coffin. It was blood-red satin, strapless, with a slit that ran up to the thigh. "Wear it," the note from Stefano read. "Tonight, you are the Queen of New York." Coraline stared at her reflection in the full-length mirror. The bruise on her shoulder was fading, hidden by a clever wrap. She looked transformed. The tired waitress with the aching feet was gone. In her place was a woman who looked like she belonged in Stefano Moretti's world, but her hands were shaking. Earlier that afternoon, while the maids were cleaning, Coraline had managed to steal a moment with the gardener's phone. She had sent one desperate text to Danny. "Stop running. Turn yourself in to the police. It's the only way you survive." Danny's reply had been chilling. "I can't. I owe money to the Irish mob. They said if I don't kill Moretti, they kill me. I'm coming for him tonight." Coraline felt sick. Danny was going to try again. Tonight. At the gala. A knock at the door. Stefano entered. He wore a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. He stopped when he saw her, and for a split second, the act dropped. He actually looked stunned. "Bellissima," he whispered. "Beautiful." He offered his arm. "Are you ready to meet the city?" "Do I have a choice?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "No." The drive to the Pierre Hotel was a blur of police escorts and flashing lights. When they arrived, the paparazzi swarmed the car like locusts. Cameras flashed, blinding and aggressive. "Keep your head up," Stefano murmured as they stepped onto the red carpet. "Show no fear. You're with me." He placed his hand on the small of her back, guiding her through the shark tank. Inside, the ballroom was a sea of diamonds, tuxedos, and fake smiles. Politicians, judges, celebrities. They all bowed to Stefano. Mr. Moretti, a heavy-set man with a thick moustache, approached. It was Councilman O'Shea, and this must be the heroine we've read about. "Coraline, meet Councilman O'Shea," Stefano said, his grip on her waist tightening slightly. "He ensures our construction permits are processed efficiently." Coraline forced a smile. "A pleasure." "Brave girl," O'Shea grunted. "Taking a bullet for the boss. That's loyalty you can't buy." "Let's dance," Stefano cut in, steering her away before she could respond. He pulled her onto the dance floor. The orchestra was playing a waltz. Stefano moved with the same precision he applied to everything else. He held her close, his body a solid wall of heat against hers. "You're trembling," he whispered. "Are you cold?" "I'm terrified," she admitted. She scanned the room over his shoulder. Every waiter with a tray, every guest reaching into a jacket. She saw Danny everywhere. "You're safe," Stefano said, pulling her closer so her chest pressed against his. "My men are at every exit. Nothing gets in or out without me knowing." "That's what I'm afraid of," she thought. Suddenly the mood shifted. A hush fell over the room. A group of men had entered the balcony, overlooking the ballroom. "Who are they?" Coraline asked. Stefano's jaw tightened. "The O'Sullivan brothers. Irish mob. They weren't invited." Coraline's blood ran cold. The Irish mob. The people holding Danny's debt. Patrick O'Sullivan, the leader, raised a glass from the balcony. He had a face like a bulldog, and eyes that promised violence. He locked eyes with Stefano. It was a silent declaration of war. "Luca," Stefano spoke into his lapel microphone. "Keep eyes on the Irish. If they twitch, drop them." "Stefano," Coraline whispered, panic rising. "Maybe we should leave and show weakness." Stefano shook his head. "Never." "Tuo." Just then, a waiter bumped into Coraline, spilling champagne on her red dress. "I am so sorry, madam," the waiter gasped, pulling out a napkin. Coraline looked down. The waiter was young, pale, and wearing a fake moustache that was peeling at the corner. It was Danny. Her breath stopped. She looked at Stefano. He was looking up at the balcony, glaring at the O'Sullivans. He hadn't seen Danny's face yet. "Go," she hissed at the waiter, grabbing his wrist under the napkin. "Get out of here." "I can't," Danny whispered, his eyes wild. He pressed a small folded note into her hand. "The kitchen, 10 minutes. I need your help to get in close." "Is everything all right?" Stefano asked, looking down. Coraline's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She shoved the note into her bra. "Just a clumsy waiter," she said, her voice high and brittle. "He spilled champagne on me. I need to go to the powder room to clean it off." Stefano looked at the waiter. Danny kept his head down, trembling. Stefano's eyes narrowed. He recognized the fear. He recognized the build. "Go clean up," Stefano said to Coraline. Then he turned to Danny. "You, come with me. I need a fresh bottle." "No," Coraline blurted out. The room went silent. Stefano turned back to her slowly. "No? I mean—" Coraline scrambled for an excuse. "It's bad luck. To send away a waiter who spilled wine. It means good fortune is coming. Just let him go." Stefano stared at her. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. He looked at Coraline's desperate eyes. He looked at the waiter's shaking hands. He knew. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. It was a smile of pure, glacial disappointment. "As you wish, my love," Stefano said. He waved a hand at Danny. "Get out of my sight." Danny scrambled away towards the kitchen. "Go to the bathroom, Coraline," Stefano said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Don't take too long. The night is just getting started." Coraline rushed toward the ladies' room, her legs shaking. She waited until she was inside a stall before unfolding the note Danny had given her. It wasn't a plan for escape. It was a diagram, a map of the ballroom. An X marked the spot directly under the heavy crystal chandelier. "Get him under the light at midnight. I'll cut the cable." Coraline clamped a hand over her mouth to stop a scream. Danny wasn't asking for help to escape. He was asking her to help him assassinate Stefano. She checked her watch. 11:55 p.m. She had 5 minutes to decide. If she warned Stefano, Danny would die. Stefano's men would tear him apart. If she did nothing, Stefano would die. The man who had protected her, the man who played piano for her, the man she was starting to love. She burst out of the bathroom. The ballroom was loud, the music swelling to a crescendo. Stefano was standing right where the X would be, talking to the chief of police. Above him, the massive chandelier glittered. Thousands of pounds of crystal and steel hanging by a single chain. She saw a shadow move on the catwalk above. Danny. She saw Luca moving through the crowd, hand inside his jacket, heading toward the kitchen where Danny had fled from earlier. Luca had figured it out. He was hunting her brother. Coraline ran. She didn't run to Stefano. She ran to the middle of the floor, waving her arms. "Stefano!" she screamed. He turned. The entire room turned. "Move!" She lunged at him, pushing him hard. Snap! The sound of the cable snapping was like a gunshot. The massive chandelier plummeted. Stefano grabbed Coraline's waist and threw them both sideways. Crash! The floor shook. Crystal shards exploded like shrapnel. Dust billowed up, choking the air. The chandelier had decimated the spot where Stefano had been standing seconds ago. Silence. Then screaming. Stefano lay on top of Coraline, shielding her from the glass. He lifted his head, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. He looked at the wreckage, then down at her. "You saved me again," he whispered, wiping dust from her face. But his eyes weren't filled with gratitude this time. They were filled with realization. "You knew," he said. It wasn't a question. "You knew it was falling." Before she could answer, gunfire erupted from the balcony. The O'Sullivans were making their move. "Get her out!" Stefano roared, dragging Coraline to her feet. "Luca, secure the exits." "The boy!" Luca shouted over the gunfire. "I saw the boy on the catwalk." "Leave him!" Stefano yelled, firing a handgun he had pulled from his waistband at the balcony. "Get Coraline to the car." He shoved Coraline into Luca's arms. "Get her out of here, now!" As Luca dragged her towards the kitchen exit, Coraline looked back. Stefano was standing amidst the shattered glass, firing at the assassins above, a lone figure of vengeance. He wasn't retreating, he was fighting, and he had let Danny go, again. But as they burst into the alleyway behind the hotel, Coraline realized the truth. Stefano hadn't let Danny go out of mercy. He had let him go because the game had changed. He didn't want to kill Danny anymore. He wanted to own him. And now that Coraline had betrayed her brother's plan to save Stefano, she belonged to the Mafia king completely. The drive back to the estate was different this time. There was no hand-holding, no soft whispers. The silence in the armored SUV was heavy enough to crush bone. Stefano sat staring out the window, his jaw set in a line of granite. He held a rag to his bleeding forehead, but he refused to look at Coraline. When they arrived, the house wasn't a sanctuary anymore. It was a command center. Men with assault rifles were jogging across the lawn. The windows were shuttered. "Go to the study," Stefano ordered as they stepped into the foyer. It wasn't a request. Coraline walked into the study, her red dress ruined, stained with champagne and dust. She stood by the fireplace, shivering. Stefano entered a moment later. He slammed the door, the sound echoing like a gunshot. He walked to his desk and poured 2 drinks. Neat scotch. He downed one in a single swallow and threw the glass into the fireplace. It shattered near Coraline's feet. "Stop trembling," he growled. "You didn't tremble when you pushed me out of the way of a falling chandelier. You have reflexes of a soldier, Coraline, or a killer." "I saved you," she whispered. "You saved me from a trap you knew was set." Stefano turned on her, his eyes blazing. "You knew the waiter. You let him go. You lied to my face in front of my enemies." He stalked toward her, stopping inches away. "Who is he? And don't you dare lie to me again." Coraline looked up at him. The game was over. "He's my brother." Stefano froze. The rage didn't vanish, but it shifted into something colder, more calculating. "Danny!" "Yes," Coraline cried, tears spilling over. "He's in trouble, Stefano. The O'Sullivans. They own his debt. They forced him to do it. He's not a killer. He's just a scared kid." "He's 22 years old," Stefano said dismissively. "He's old enough to pull a trigger. He's old enough to cut a cable. He missed. He missed on purpose." "He missed because you interfered," Stefano corrected. He turned his back on her, pacing the room. "The O'Sullivans made a move tonight. They tried to kill the king in front of his court. They declared war. And your brother is their soldier. He's their hostage." Coraline grabbed Stefano's arm. He looked down at her hand as if it were a poisonous spider. But he didn't pull away. "Please, you said you owed me a life debt. I'm calling it in. Save him." Stefano laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "You want me to save the man who tried to kill me twice? You want me to risk my men for a junkie who sold his soul to the Irish? I want you to save the only family I have left." She stared into his eyes, searching for the man who had played the piano. "If you love me, even a little, you'll do this." Stefano's expression softened, just a fraction. He reached out and touched her cheek. "Love makes men weak, Coraline. And tonight, I cannot afford to be weak." He pulled away and walked to his desk, hitting the intercom button. "Luca, get in here." The door opened instantly. Luca entered, looking bruised and angry. "We found the brother," Luca said, glaring at Coraline. "The O'Sullivans picked him up outside the hotel. They know he failed. They took him to the Navy Yard." "They're going to kill him," Coraline gasped. "No," Stefano said, checking the magazine of his pistol. "If they wanted him dead, they would have left him in the alley. They took him because they know who he is to you, and they know who you are to me." Stefano holstered his weapon and put on a fresh suit jacket. He looked like the devil dressed for a funeral. "They are using him as bait to draw me out," Stefano explained. "It's a trap." "Then we don't go," Luca advised. "Let them have the kid." "We go," Stefano said. He looked at Coraline. "But we do it my way." He walked over to Coraline and grabbed her shoulders. "You want your brother back? You're coming with me." "What?" Luca protested. "Boss, she's a liability." "She's the trade," Stefano said coldly. "Patrick O'Sullivan wants to hurt me. He thinks taking my new queen will hurt me more than a bullet." Coraline felt the blood drain from her face. "You're trading me?" "I'm gambling you," Stefano corrected. "Trust me, Coraline. Tonight, you have to be more than a waitress. You have to be a Moretti." He pulled a small silver pistol from his desk drawer and pressed it into her hand. It was heavy and cold. "Do you know how to use this?" "No," she whispered. "Point. Pull. Don't hesitate." He leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. "Because if things go wrong tonight, I won't be the one killing you. I'll expect you to do it yourself before the Irish get their hands on you." The Brooklyn Navy Yard was a graveyard of industry. Rusted cranes loomed like skeletal fingers in the fog. The smell of salt water and rotting wood hung heavy in the air. Stefano's convoy stopped at the gate of an abandoned dry dock. Rain hammered against the roof of the SUV. "Stay close to me," Stefano commanded. "Luca, hold to the perimeter, Sarah. If I give the signal, burn it all down." Coraline gripped the small pistol in her coat pocket. Her hand was sweating so much she was afraid she'd drop it. She stepped out into the rain, the wind whipping her hair across her face. They walked toward the warehouse in the center of the dock. It was a massive, cavernous space, lit by a single construction floodlight. In the center of the light, a chair sat on a plastic tarp. Tied to the chair was Danny. He looked bad. His face was swollen, one eye shut. His waiter's uniform was torn. Standing behind him was Patrick O'Sullivan, holding a serrated hunting knife. 6 other men stood in the shadows, armed with shotguns. "Stefano!" Patrick shouted, his voice echoing off the metal walls. "So nice of you to join the party. And you brought the little lady. How romantic." Stefano stopped 20 feet away. He stood with his hands open, showing he wasn't holding a weapon. Coraline stood slightly behind him, her heart hammering so loud she thought Patrick could hear it. "Let the boy go, Patrick," Stefano said calmly. "He's a civilian. This is between us." "He's not a civilian. He's a failed assassin," Patrick sneered, pressing the blade against Danny's cheek. A thin line of blood appeared. Danny whimpered. "Coraline, go, run." "I'm not leaving you, Danny," Coraline called out, her voice surprisingly steady. "Touching," Patrick mocked. "Here's the deal, Moretti. You sign over the unions on the west side, and you leave the girl. You walk away. The boy walks away. But the girl stays with us." Stefano laughed. It was a dark, terrifying sound in the empty warehouse. "You think I came here to negotiate?" Stefano asked. He took a step forward. "I came here to accept your surrender." Patrick's face went red. "I have 7 men. You have a girl and a suit. Kill him." The men in the shadows raised their shotguns. "Now!" Stefano roared. Crack thum. The skylights of the warehouse exploded inward. Stefano hadn't just brought Luca. He had brought the ghosts. Snipers rappelled from the ceiling beams on silent lines. At the same moment, the large bay doors of the warehouse blew open with a concussive blast. Stefano grabbed Coraline and threw her behind a stack of crates, just as the air filled with lead. "Stay down!" he screamed. The warehouse became a war zone. Muzzle flashes lit up the dark like strobe lights. The sound was deafening. Coraline curled into a ball, covering her ears. "Danny!" she screamed. She peeked over the crate. Danny was still tied to the chair in the center of the crossfire. The plastic tarp was getting slippery with rainwater leaking from the roof, and blood. Patrick O'Sullivan had grabbed Danny's chair and was dragging him backward, using her brother as a human shield while firing a revolver at Stefano's men. Stefano was moving. He moved differently than the others. No wasted motion. He fired 2 shots, dropping a man on the catwalk, then rolled behind a forklift. He was cutting a path toward Patrick. But Patrick was faster. He dragged Danny toward a side door. "Stefano, he's taking him!" Coraline yelled. Stefano looked at her. He looked at Patrick, who was almost at the door. He couldn't get a clear shot without hitting Danny. "Coraline!" "No!" Stefano shouted, tossing her a look she understood instantly. The gun. She wasn't a waitress anymore. She was the woman who saved the king. Coraline stood up. She leveled the silver pistol Stefano had given her. Her hands were shaking, but her vision was clear. Patrick paused at the door, laughing. "You can't do it, sweetheart." He raised his gun to shoot Danny in the head, just to spite them. Coraline didn't think about the debt. She didn't think about the morality. She thought about the scar on Danny's eyebrow, from when they were kids. She pulled the trigger. The gun kicked hard, bruising her palm. The shot went wide, hitting the metal door frame with a spark, but it was enough. Patrick flinched. In that split second of distraction, Stefano broke cover. He didn't shoot. He closed the distance with terrifying speed, tackling Patrick into the wall. The impact cracked the plaster. Danny's chair toppled over. Stefano and Patrick wrestled on the wet concrete. It was brutal, primal. Patrick slashed with the knife, catching Stefano in the forearm. Stefano didn't even grunt. He grabbed Patrick's wrist, twisted it with a sickening snap, and drove his knee into the Irishman's chest. Patrick gasped, falling to his knees. Stefano stood over him, breathing hard, blood dripping from his arm. He picked up the knife Patrick had dropped. "I told you," Stefano whispered, leaning down. "I don't negotiate." He didn't hesitate. He ended the war. Silence returned to the warehouse, broken only by the sound of rain and Danny's sobbing. Coraline ran across the floor. She fell to her knees beside the overturned chair, fumbling with the ropes. Danny, are you okay?" "Coraline," he wept, shaking uncontrollably. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "It's okay," she soothed, cutting the last rope. He collapsed into her arms. Stefano watched them from a distance. He wiped the blade on his coat and tossed it away. He looked at his men, who were securing the area. Then he looked at Coraline. She was covered in grime, holding a weeping man, a gun in her pocket. He walked over to them. Danny flinched, trying to hide behind Coraline. "Get up," Stefano said to Danny. Danny scrambled to his feet, terrified. "Take a car," Stefano said, pointing to the exit where Luca was waiting. "Luca will drive you to the airport. You have a ticket to London. One way. You never come back to New York. If I see you in this hemisphere again, I will finish what the O'Sullivans started." "Thank you," Danny stammered. He looked at Coraline. "Come with me, Coraline. We can leave." Coraline stood up. She looked at her brother, the boy she had raised. Then she looked at Stefano, the man who had just killed for her, the man who was bleeding for her. She looked at the gun in her pocket. She had fired it. She had crossed a line. The innocent waitress who worked double shifts was dead. She had died in that warehouse. "Go, Danny," Coraline said softly. "Coraline?" Danny looked confused. "I can't go," she said, stepping back to stand beside Stefano. "I belong here now." Danny looked at them, the Mafia boss and the waitress, standing side by side in the wreckage. He nodded slowly, understanding a truth that Coraline was just beginning to accept. He turned and ran toward the car. Stefano watched him go, then turned to Coraline. He didn't smile. He reached out and took her hand. His hand was bloody. Hers was shaking. "It's done," he said. "Is it?" Coraline asked, looking at the bodies of the O'Sullivan men. "This doesn't end, does it? There will be others." "There are always others," Stefano admitted. "That is the price of the crown." He pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "But now, you are not just a protected guest, Coraline. You are an accomplice." Coraline rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. She had saved the devil, and in return he had given her a kingdom of ash and blood. And God help her, she didn't want to leave. 6 months later. New York City in May was a different beast than in November. The grey slush was gone, replaced by the scent of blooming magnolias and the hot asphalt of Fifth Avenue. Coraline Jones sat in the back of the Maybach, watching the city blur past the tinted windows. She wasn't wearing an apron anymore. She was wearing a tailored white pantsuit from Chanel, her hair cut into a sharp, chic bob. On her finger, a diamond the size of a quail's egg caught the light. She wasn't just Coraline anymore. In the whispers of the underworld, she was La Signora, the woman who didn't flinch. "We're arriving at the Pierre," Luca said from the front seat. He treated her with deference now, fear even. "Thank you, Luca," she said, her voice cool and polished. Tonight was important. It was a sit-down, not with rival gangs, but with the city's elite. The judges, the union leaders, the silent partners who kept the Moretti empire untouchable, and specifically with Judge Calloway, the man who held the power to dismiss the pending federal investigation into Stefano's businesses. The car stopped. Coraline stepped out, cameras flashing. She didn't blink. She walked into the private dining room where Stefano was already waiting. He stood up when she entered. He looked tired. The war with the Irish had been won, but peace was expensive. There was a leak in the organization. Someone high up was feeding information to the feds. It was the one threat Stefano couldn't shoot his way out of. You look dangerous, Stefano said, kissing her cheek. I learned from the best, she replied, taking her seat at his right hand. The dinner was tense. Judge Calloway was a boisterous man with a red face and a louder laugh. He drank too much scotch and told stories that weren't funny. Beside him sat Victor, one of Stefano's oldest capos, a man who had been with the family for 30 years. So Stefano, Judge Calloway boomed, cutting into his steak. The rumors about the indictment. My sources say the prosecutor has a recording, a voice recording of a deal made in January. Very damaging. The room went deadly silent. A recording. That meant a wire. That meant a traitor at the table. Stefano's hand tightened on his wine glass. We are handling it, Judge. It's gossip. I hope so, Victor added, shaking his head solemnly. We can't afford a slip-up now, boss. Maybe we should pause operations until the heat dies down. Coraline watched Victor. She watched the way he dabbed his mouth with his napkin. She watched his eyes dart to the judge, then to the door. She felt that familiar prickle on the back of her neck. The waitress instinct, the ability to read a customer who was about to skip out on the bill. She remembered January 15th, the day of the blizzard. Stefano had held a meeting in the library. Victor had been there. He had worn a thick tweed jacket, even though the heating was on. He had complained about the draft. Coraline leaned forward, picking up her water glass. Victor, she said softly. The table turned to her. In this world, the women usually stayed silent during business. Yes, Coraline? Victor smiled, but it was patronizing. That watch, she said, pointing to the gold Rolex on his wrist. It's new, isn't it? The day-date model. Platinum? Victor blinked, confused by the sudden change in topic. Yes, a gift to myself. January, Coraline mused. You bought it in January. I remember you checking the time constantly during the blizzard meeting. You were nervous that day. Everyone was nervous, Coraline. Stefano cut in gently, trying to steer the conversation back. The storm. No, Coraline interrupted, her eyes locking onto Victor's. You weren't nervous about the storm. You were nervous because you were wearing a wire. And the battery pack was bulky under that tweed jacket you refused to take off. Victor's face went pale. That's insane. Boss, she's crazy. Is she? Stefano looked at Coraline. He saw the certainty in her eyes, the same certainty she had when she yelled, "Get down." Judge Calloway, Coraline said, turning to the judge. You mentioned a recording from January. Was it the 15th, the day of the blizzard? The judge looked uncomfortable. I believe it was. Coraline turned back to Victor. You sold us out, Victor. For what? Immunity? Or did the Irish pay you before they died? Victor stood up, knocking his chair over. I'm not listening to this. I've served this family for 3 decades. He reached into his jacket. Luca! Stefano barked. But Coraline was faster. She didn't have a gun this time. She had a steak knife. She didn't throw it. She slammed it into the table, the blade vibrating inches from Victor's hand as he reached for his weapon. The sound was like a gavel striking. Sit down, Victor, Coraline commanded. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a death sentence. Victor froze. He looked at the knife. He looked at the guards stepping forward. He slumped back into his chair, defeated. Check him, Stefano ordered. Luca patted Victor down. He pulled a small black recorder from Victor's inside pocket. It was running. The silence in the room was absolute. Stefano took the recorder. He crushed it in his hand. He looked at Victor with profound sadness. Then he looked at Coraline with awe. Take him, Stefano whispered. Luca and the guards dragged Victor out. The traitor didn't beg. He knew the rules. Judge Calloway cleared his throat, his face pale. Well, it seems the leak has been plugged. It has, Stefano said. He stood up and extended his hand to Coraline. Come, my love. Let's go home. The judge can finish his steak alone. They walked out of the hotel, leaving the most powerful men in the city staring at their empty chairs. Outside, the night air was cool. How did you know? Stefano asked as they got into the car. About the jacket? The wire? I was a waitress, Stefano, she said, resting her head on his shoulder. I spent 10 years watching people lie. I know when someone is ordering a drink they can't pay for. Stefano laughed, a genuine, warm sound. He took her hand, kissing the ring he had given her. I thought I saved you that night at the restaurant, he murmured, but I think you saved me. Coraline looked out the window at the city lights. Somewhere in London, Danny was starting a new life. Somewhere in Queens, a for rent sign hung on her old apartment. She squeezed Stefano's hand. We saved each other, she said. The car disappeared into the stream of traffic, just another shadow in a city of secrets. The waitress was gone. The Queen had arrived. And long live the Queen. And that is the story of Coraline Jones. She started as a woman with nothing. No money, no power, just a tray of drinks and a desperate secret. She ended up holding the keys to the kingdom. It makes you wonder, in a moment of crisis, would you run or would you stand your ground? Sometimes the person serving your coffee sees more than you think, and sometimes the person you underestimate is the one who ends up ruling the board. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, romance, and high-stakes justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who loves a good twist, and hit subscribe with the notification bell turned on so you never miss a new story. We drop new dramas every week. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there.